In 1798, the air over the Atlantic carried the restless hum of tension. The United States, a young, proud nation not yet 25 years old, was once again being tested by the world's great powers. This time, the challenge came not from Britain, the old enemy, but from a former ally, France. It was not a declared war, but it was a war all the same, a battle of pride, trade, and survival. A war that would prove whether America could truly stand on its own. It would be remembered as the Quasi-War, a naval conflict fought from 1798 to 1800, and it would mark the moment the United States took its place among the world's nations. Only a few years earlier, the French had been hailed as heroes in America. They had helped George Washington's army defeat the British. The two nations had pledged friendship and alliance through the Treaty of 1778, a bond sealed in blood and victory. But after the French Revolution erupted in 1789, France changed. The monarchy that had once supported America was overthrown. The streets of Paris ran red as a new government. The French Republic rose under the cry of liberty, equality, fraternity. At first, many Americans cheered. But soon, the revolution turned violent. Kings, nobles, and priests were executed. Then France went to war against nearly all of Europe, including Britain. The United States, trying to stay neutral, found itself caught in the middle. To protect its trade and avoid conflict, President George Washington signed the Jay Treaty with Britain in 1794, reopening trade and settling old disputes. To the French, this was unforgivable. They saw it as a betrayal. How could America, their former ally, make peace with the enemy France was still fighting? France's answer came quickly, through the roar of cannon fire at sea. By 1796, French privateers and warships began seizing American merchant vessels in the Caribbean and the Atlantic Ocean. They stopped ships flying the American flag, searched them, confiscated cargo, and sometimes imprisoned their crews. Over 300 American ships were captured in just a few years. Trade was disrupted, families suffered, and merchants cried out for protection. The message from France was clear: choose us or suffer the consequences. But America would not be bullied. When John Adams became president in 1797, he faced a nation on the edge of crisis. Britain and France were at war, and both demanded loyalty. Adams knew that if America took sides, it might be drawn into another devastating conflict. He chose peace, or at least, he tried to. He sent 3 respected diplomats to France to negotiate a settlement: Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, John Marshall, and Elbridge Gerry. Their mission was simple: to make peace without losing dignity. But when they arrived in Paris, the French refused to see them. Instead of being welcomed, the Americans were approached by 3 secret agents of the French government. These men would become known in history only as X, Y, and Z. They demanded huge bribes and loans before they would even allow the American delegation to speak with France's foreign minister, Talleyrand. It was a demand for tribute, a ransom for diplomacy. When word of this reached America, it caused an explosion of outrage. The people were furious. Newspapers filled with headlines condemning French arrogance. The phrase spread like wildfire: millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute. For the first time since independence, Americans stood united in anger against a foreign nation. John Adams, calm but firm, refused to pay. He ordered preparations for war. And across the ports of the young republic, the sound of hammer and forge echoed once more. America had disbanded most of its navy after the Revolution. But now, shipyards from Boston to Baltimore came alive. Timber was cut, iron was forged, and new warships began to take shape, sleek, strong, and built for speed. Out of this moment of crisis came some of the most legendary ships in American history. The USS Constitution, later nicknamed Old Ironsides. The USS Constellation, swift and deadly. The USS United States, powerful and proud. In April 1798, Congress officially created the Department of the Navy, and Benjamin Stoddert became its first secretary. America now had a navy worthy of its independence. President Adams gave his officers a clear mission: defend our commerce. Protect our honor. Do not provoke war, but do not retreat from it. By mid-1798, American frigates were patrolling the Caribbean and the Atlantic. Though Congress never declared war, naval combat began almost immediately. The French expected easy victories. They were experienced, confident, and battle-hardened. But they underestimated the discipline and resolve of American sailors. The first major victory came in February 1799. Off the island of Nevis, the USS Constellation, commanded by Commodore Thomas Truxtun, sighted the French frigate L'Insurgent. The Constellation gave chase. The 2 ships closed in, sails full, cannons ready. The French fired first, but their shots went wide. Truxtun waited, steady, and then unleashed a devastating broadside. The battle lasted barely an hour. When the smoke cleared, L'Insurgent had lost her masts and surrendered. It was an overwhelming American victory. Word reached home, and the nation erupted in pride. The U.S. Navy had struck its first major blow, and it was against France, once the mightiest power in Europe. A year later, Truxton's Constellation met another French frigate, La Vengeance, off Guadeloupe. The battle raged for hours, under the cover of night. The ships fired broadside after broadside, exchanging over 1,200 cannon shots. The Constellation suffered heavy damage, but her crew refused to give in. The French ship, battered and burning, finally broke off and fled. Truxton and his men had once again proven that the American Navy, though young, was fearless. Their courage became legend. All across the Caribbean, American ships began to dominate. The USS Enterprise, USS Boston, USS Delaware, and other frigates hunted down French privateers, capturing or sinking dozens of them. In the span of 2 years, the United States Navy captured or destroyed nearly 100 French vessels, while losing almost none of its own. The balance of power had shifted. France, once the predator, was now the prey. American merchant ships began sailing again with confidence, flying the stars and stripes proudly across the sea. British captains, who had once sneered at America's weakness, now offered respect. And French officers, once arrogant, learned caution when facing American guns. At home, the victories at sea sparked a wave of national pride. The Navy became a symbol of unity, courage, and honor. Merchants prospered again, and sailors were celebrated as heroes. Even those who had doubted Adams began to see that his policy of armed neutrality had been wise. He had defended America without plunging it into total war. He had stood firm against France, and he had done so without sacrificing principle. Meanwhile, across the ocean, France itself was changing. The French Republic, torn by years of revolution, had lost direction. In 1799, a young general named Napoleon Bonaparte seized power, promising order and glory. Napoleon looked at America differently. He did not want endless conflict with the United States. He wanted peace so that France could focus on its wars in Europe. Through secret channels, France sent word to President Adams, "Let us end this quarrel." Despite his successes, Adams faced political fire at home. His own party, the Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, wanted to use the Quasi-War as an excuse to invade French colonies in the Caribbean. They wanted glory and power. But Adams, thinking of the nation's future, refused. He knew that endless war could destroy the young republic. Instead, he sent new diplomats to France. In 1800, they signed the Convention of Mortefontaine, also known as the Treaty of 1800. The agreement ended the Quasi-War. France stopped attacking American ships, and both sides released captured vessels. Even more importantly, the old alliance of 1778, which had tied America to France, was formally cancelled. From that moment on, the United States stood completely independent, tied to no European power, loyal only to its own interests. The Quasi-War had lasted barely 2 years. No territory had changed hands. No formal declarations had ever been made, yet its consequences were enormous. It gave birth to a permanent American Navy, the same Navy that would later defeat the British in the War of 1812, suppress piracy, and project U.S. power across the world. It proved that the young republic could defend its commerce, protect its citizens, and stand as an equal among nations. It showed the world, and the American people themselves, that this new nation would never be pushed, bribed, or bullied into submission. In those years between 1798 and 1800, the United States transformed from a fragile experiment into a confident maritime power. When history looks back on John Adams, his presidency is often overshadowed by those of Washington and Jefferson. But in truth, Adams' calm courage during the Quasi-War may have saved the nation. He avoided the ruin of war, yet refused humiliation. He built a navy that would outlast his critics. And he proved that America's true strength lay not in conquest, but in principle and discipline. Years later, Adams would write, "I desire no triumph but that of peace, peace with honor." And in the Quasi-War, he achieved exactly that. The Quasi-War is often forgotten today. It was undeclared, fought far from home, and ended without a grand treaty or parade. But in the quiet courage of those sailors, in the roar of their cannon and the snap of their flags, a new identity was born. America was no longer a timid republic hoping for protection. It had stood up to one of the most powerful nations on earth and prevailed. From the decks of the USS Constellation, the USS Constitution, and the USS United States, the world learned a lesson it would never forget, that the young United States of America, though small in size, possessed an unshakable will, and that will, the will to defend liberty and honor, would one day make it one of the greatest powers on earth. The year is 1800. The Atlantic is quiet once again. American ships glide across calm waters, their sails white against the blue horizon. The stars and stripes wave proudly from every mast. The French ships no longer threaten them. The world now knows America stands on its own. The Quasi-War, short, fierce, and largely forgotten, was America's first great naval stand, and the first time the world truly learned to respect the name United States of America.